We've already seen Microsoft Purview DLP in action, but can it work with your devices as well? You better believe it can with Endpoint DLP. Let's check it out for SC401. So what is Endpoint DLP? Well, it extends Microsoft Purview's data protection to Windows 10 and 11 devices and also Mac devices as well. It monitors and controls activities such as copying data to USB drives, printing sensitive documents, uploading files to cloud services, and copying data to clipboard or apps. And it works based on sensitive info types and sensitivity labels, just like other DLP policies. Before you can use Endpoint DLP, there are some prerequisites that you need to know about for setup. You need to ensure that devices are onboarded to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. You need to have the correct licensing. You need to ensure that Endpoint DLP is enabled in the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. There are some browser requirements as well. Microsoft Edge or supported Chromium browsers with the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint extension for monitoring uploads to cloud services. It's important to understand some real-world use cases as well. And when we get into the demo, we'll see some of these in action also. So, an example, a user tries to copy a file labeled confidential with a sensitivity label to a USB stick, and it will be blocked. Or someone prints a document containing passport numbers, an alert could be triggered. Or a file with sensitive info is uploaded to Dropbox, and action is logged and blocked. Okay, practical time now. We need, as ever, to be in the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal, and we need to go into Settings, and we need to navigate to Data Loss Prevention. And here we can see all of the Endpoint DLP settings that we need to be aware of. And we'll go through all of these and show you what they do. So these settings apply to all existing and new DLP policies that protect content on endpoint Windows and Mac devices. And you can get access to learn.microsoft.com articles which show you more about the configuration. Let's go through and see what we've got. We have got advanced classification, scanning, and protection. And this setting allows the Microsoft 365 cloud-based data classification service to scan and classify items, then return the results to the device. As a result, you can use features like exact data match and named entities in your DLP policies. So you can toggle this on and off. You can set the allocated bandwidth limits, so sending content from the local device to the cloud services for scanning and classification can utilize a large portion of network bandwidth. So if this is a concern to you, you can set a per device limit of how much bandwidth can be used in a 24-hour period. So you can choose whether to limit that or not. And then by default, when the above toggle is turned on, advanced classification will cover Office and PDF. If you want to have advanced classification for other file extensions, then you need to use the setting where the file extensions you endpoint in this section here below have to be under the scope of Endpoint DLP monitored files. So you can see here we can click and we can add other file extensions and save the ones that we want. We have some settings for advanced label-based protection for all files on devices. Turning this feature on will allow users working on files, including files other than Office and PDF files, with sensitivity labels that apply access control settings in an unencrypted state on their devices. Endpoint DLP will continue to monitor and enforce access control and label-based protection on these files, even in an unencrypted state, and automatically encrypt them before they're transferred outside from a user's device. Important to note that this feature is only supported on Windows devices, not Mac. So that might be an exam question that you need to look out for. You can enable this by clicking devices, and you can scope it to all users and groups, or edit that to narrow down the scope, and then save the settings that you want to configure. Next, we have some file path exclusion sections for both Windows and for Mac. Let's just expand both of those. They're very similar, and files in these locations for Windows and for Mac won't be monitored by your policies. So you can add specific file paths in here in order to exclude them from the policies. There are some options to set up evidence collection for file activities on devices. So setting up online storage will let you store and collect original files as evidences when any rule matches for configured file activities occur. So you can toggle that on, or you should be able to. There we go. And then you can set the evidence cache on the device, and you can select the storage type. So you can go for a customer managed store, or you can go for a Microsoft managed store, and then you can add the storage that you need and provide the name and the URL to it. So there you go. So with Microsoft managed store, I went a little bit too quickly there. It looks as though that does it pretty automatically for you, but you can browse it to your own managed store there. We've got network share coverage and exclusions, so you can extend Endpoint DLP coverage to network shares and mapped drives, which is really cool. So you can toggle that on, and you can provide the network share path exclusion there that you want to. So very, very good option for you there. So next we have restricted apps and app groups. So this controls the level of access that specific apps have to the sensitive content detected in your DLP policy. So what those apps can do. You can create groups of apps to enforce different access restrictions for each group, or add apps individually. So here we go. You can do those app groups or restricted apps individually. And if you go in, you can add things in here as you need. You can put in the app name, enter the executable name, and then we've got settings here for auto quarantine files on devices that are blocked from accessing this app, and collect original file as evidence for this app, so you can check those as needed. And here are some examples of the app names that we want to look out for. So we've got Notepad++ and the executable for it, and the auto quarantine and evidence collection settings, and we can add more in as needed. Very, very useful setting indeed. And then there's the auto quarantine settings at the bottom of that as well. We've got unsupported file extension exclusions. So DLP policies can be configured to restrict activity involving files with extensions that aren't supported by Endpoint DLP. Because this can potentially include many unsupported file extensions, you can refine detection by adding unsupported extensions to exclude. So you can add these unsupported extensions in here quite easily and save them as needed. We've got unallowed Bluetooth apps, prevent people from using specific Bluetooth apps to copy or move protected files to another location. So you can add or edit these right here. And you can include the Bluetooth apps recommended by Microsoft. So that is on. And it gives you some examples here that it will include fsquirt.exe, blueftp.exe, and airdroid.exe. So you can add your own and have the Microsoft recommended ones as well. We have some additional settings for Endpoint DLP here. So this is for business justification and policy tips, and it enables you to control how users interact with the business justification option in policy tip notifications that appear on the devices. This option appears when users perform an activity that is protected by the block with override setting in a DLP policy. So the options we have are show default options and a custom text box, or you can show only the default options or only the custom text box. So users can either choose a built-in justification or create their own, and you can customize the options in the drop-down menu as well to show option 1 or 2 or 3 and so on and so forth. So very flexible options there. We've got Endpoint DLP support for onboarded servers, and when turned on, Endpoint DLP will be enabled for all servers that are onboarded in your organization. So very handy to have your servers included in that, as well as your Windows 10 and 11 and Mac devices. Always audit file activity for devices is the next setting, and by default, when devices are onboarded, activity for Office, PDF, and CSV files is automatically audited and available for review in the Activity Explorer. You can turn this off if you want this activity to be audited only when onboarded devices are included in an active policy. So with it on, the file activity will always be audited for any onboarded devices, regardless of whether they are included in an active DLP policy. Very useful setting. We've got a setting for printer groups, and these can be used in your Endpoint DLP policies to apply different restrictions to a specific group of printers. So we can create a printer group and you can give it a name and then add a printer and save that. And you can see there's lots of details here for the printers, the alias, the friendly printer name, etc., and some of the options there for print to file, universal print, and so on and so forth. Very, very useful indeed. As we move to the end of the list, we've got file extension groups, and this will apply restrictions to groups of file extensions. Use file extension groups in Endpoint DLP policies. So you can create these groups and you can give it a name and put in the file extensions that you want to configure for those file extension groups. We have a disable classification option, which is all about adding file extensions to be excluded from Endpoint DLP classification. So you can add those in here and edit them as needed. We've got removable media groups. So these relate to removable USB device groups, which can be used in your Endpoint DLP policies to apply different restrictions to a specific group of USB devices. So we can create removable USB device group here. We can give that a name and then add a removable USB device in here with aliases and friendly names and serial numbers, etc. Lots of control over the devices here, which is very, very cool. The second to last item here is network share groups. These can be used in the Endpoint DLP policies that you set to apply different restrictions to a specific group of network shares. So you can create the group and put in the path to the network share. Very, very cool. And the final setting here is VPN settings. So when setting up Endpoint DLP policies, you can apply different restrictions to activity performed when users are connected to your org using the VPNs that are included here in this list, where you can add or edit VPN addresses. Nice and simple. Let's just take a look at some of these other DLP settings, some of which are very relative to Endpoint DLP. So we'll go through them all so you're aware of them, as you may be asked about these within the exam. We have email templates, and we can use these to create reusable content for email notifications about an alert, which can help make sure your communications are efficient and consistent. Very easy to set up, and you can give it a name, a description, who is going to be in the to field, the BCC and CC, the subject, the message title and the message body, etc. Very simple to do. We have some analytics settings that you can apply and recommended actions settings to activate analytics. This will allow you to receive data insights. And once you've done that, just be aware that it's going to take up to 7 days potentially for you to see those analytics and recommendations for your tenant. We have enable email notifications for new insights as well. I'm not entirely sure why that is grayed out for me. I have to admit, I don't really know. If anyone knows, please hit me up in the comments. This one here, just-in-time protection, is very connected to Endpoint DLP, so very important to know about this in the context of the exam, as you may be asked about it in relation to Endpoint DLP. And just-in-time, or JIT protection, evaluates content shared from devices to dynamically help prevent sensitive data from inappropriately leaving your organization. And there's a little warning here that when JIT protection is on, it's recommended that Windows devices have anti-malware client version 4.18.23080 or newer installed. Earlier versions might result in activity being unexpectedly blocked. So very handy information alerts here, even within setting up these configurations. We can choose here which locations to monitor, and by default, users and groups that you specify will be prevented from completing actions while their files are being evaluated. So as ever, you can choose devices, you can scope it to all account or distribution groups, or you can edit and scope it to exclude a few specific accounts or distribution groups, or set only specific accounts or distribution groups that you want to include. So very cool that you can specify that. Some additional settings here, you can configure these for the devices in your organization. And the first one we see here is a fallback action in case of failure. So you can choose what action to enforce if the just-in-time protection is unable to evaluate content in the expected time frame. You can choose whether to allow the users to complete the actions that they are attempting to carry out or whether to block them from doing so. So very, very good feature there that you can enable. And you can customize notification here, which is a default message which is shown to users while their file is being evaluated, but you can customize it if needed. There are some options here for controlling copying to clipboard. You can turn this on if you want to prevent users from copying content to the clipboard while JIT protection is evaluating their file. You can configure the app exclusions for Windows here, which the apps that you include here won't be evaluated by JIT protection. Same principle for Mac as well. And then we've got file path exclusions for Windows also and for Mac. Nice and simple. And then we've got file extension exclusions that you configure as well. So JIT, very important to know about it. Make sure you're well versed with what it can do and how it relates to endpoint data loss prevention. Here we've got a preview feature, unlikely to be covered in the exam, I would think, as I record this, but by the time you're watching this, it's possible that it's included, so I'll include it here. This feature captures critical diagnostic data from onboarded endpoint devices for issue reporting. Comprehensive trace logs will be automatically recorded and locally stored on devices, so you won't have to reproduce issues to identify their cause anymore. And turning this feature off might make diagnosing endpoint data loss issues harder and cause longer downtime. When it's turned on, though, you'll identify risks more easily. You can troubleshoot faster and you can do more. And there's a nice Learn article here, which I do encourage you to read as well. So you can turn this on and you can set the cache storage period for the recommended setting or less, and set the maximum storage setting for this device as well. So really cool stuff. Next, we have some Power Automate settings. So you can create and manage Power Automate workflows that help your organization meet its needs. So here we can create a workflow. You can create a custom template here or use an existing template. And I'll show you here an example of one that you can use. So here's one pre-packaged by Microsoft for you to use. It's Notify Manager for DLP. So this is pretty cool, and it's going to send an email message to a user's manager for a DLP protection violation to notify that manager of DLP alerts for their direct report. So you just need to make sure that you have these connectors enabled for M365 compliance, Office 365 users, and for Outlook. And then you can continue to set that up to notify the manager, and it's going to show you exactly what it's going to do here. So it's going to, when an item violates DLP policy, get the manager name, send an email, and show the sensitivity as well, and you can save that. So pretty cool stuff, and you can do a lot of nice things with Power Automate related to DLP. We have the option to aggregate DLP alerts by user. So when a user triggers multiple matches for the same DLP rule in a short period, the system will consolidate these into a single alert to help you triage and investigate faster. So this applies to rules where the settings send alert every time in an activity matches the rule is selected. I think this is really good, and it's going to save a lot of noise, and you can choose the alert aggregation window in minutes here. I will leave that as so, and I'm actually going to save that one because I think that's a really good one, even in the context of a demo tenant. Cool. And then finally, integrations. So we can integrate with one or more Purview ecosystem partners to extend Purview policies to the network. This is going to enable classification, discovery, and protection of your sensitive data shared with cloud apps through browsers, apps, APIs, add-ins, and more. So we can link with things like iBoss and Netscope at the moment are supported. Really cool stuff, and very, very useful if you need that sort of integration. So with all that done, you are now able to create and modify endpoint DLP policies. You can create them in the normal way, and when you go to scope the location, as we have done in previous videos with DLP policies, select devices, and that is how you will take advantage of those endpoint DLP settings. Now, as per previous DLP videos that we've done as well, it's important to be aware of the alerts that you might get in relation to endpoint DLP. So do ensure that you look through the alerts and make sure that you're familiar with the alerts that you might receive in relation to endpoint DLP. Also look into the explorers and look into things like the Activity Explorer to see where endpoint DLP type activities occur within here, and just ensure that you're well versed with anything that you might be able to see in the Activity Explorer also. So there we go. As we wrap up, let's go through some exam tips for your quick reference. So remember the prerequisites: Defender for Endpoint Onboarding, that E5 license, Purview DLP enabled, and the browser extension. Remember the types of policy actions that are available to you: audit, block, block with override, and notify. Remember about using monitoring for endpoint DLP with tools such as Activity Explorer, the alerts dashboard, and reports. And do remember those advanced features as well, such as just-in-time protection, adaptive protection, and custom notifications. And there we go. Lots of really cool ways that you can use endpoint DLP within Microsoft Purview to control the activities that your users can do on their Windows and Mac devices. Let me know what you think. Have you worked with endpoint DLP yourself in real world scenarios? Are you studying for the SC 401 exam yourself? Let me know how you're getting along with your prep, and hopefully this video series is helping you so far. I'll be back with the next video very soon, and we're going to be moving away from DLP and on to retention or data life cycle management. In the meantime, please give me a thumbs up if you like the video. Please hit subscribe as well. That helps me so much. It's completely free and takes a second, so I appreciate it very much. Take care, stay safe, and do travel well. See you next time. Bye-bye.